snap. The kick is in the air, and the kick this time is no, sir-ree. No, sir-ree. Final score, Tennessee 20, Florida 17. Pandemonium reigns.
You're listening to the RTI Podcast, powered by RockyTopInsider.com.
Hello everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the RTI Podcast. I am Nathaniel Rutherford, the managing editor of RockyTopInsider.com, and playing the role of Jarrett Guarantano and coming off the bench to relieve Ben McKee, we have none other than RTI contributor Robert Hughes. Robert, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Glad to be SEC Offensive Player of the Week.
We're calling on you to come off the bench like Guarantano has done the past month plus, although he did get the start against Missouri. More on that here in just a second, but Ben is a little preoccupied. We both have had very busy weekends, and he's doing some basketball stuff for us here on this Monday evening. So, Robert, brought you on to, play the role of the sixth man, and you've done a good job on the podcast before, so I want to bring you back on. Speaking of Guarantano, speaking of this football team, this RTI podcast is going to be dedicated to Jarrett Guarantano, the man with the left wrist cast, the Luke Skywalker, if you want to call it, where he had the surgically repaired hand there. He came out and absolutely balled out against Missouri, against a usually stout Tiger defense that came into the game statistically as the number one pass defense in the SEC. I know that was a little loaded. They hadn't played a lot of particularly good passing offenses this season, but still, anytime you're only giving up 165 yards per game through the air, that's still pretty impressive. I think only like 11 touchdowns and 8 interceptions this year for Missouri's defense. Tennessee goes out. Guarantano throws 415 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Tennessee, yes, they only put up 24 points of offense, but that was also because of 2 blocked field goals and then a fumble by Tim Jordan. None of that was, in my opinion, on Guarantano. Tennessee still wins 24-20. And Robert, obviously the biggest story out of the game, and rightfully so, is Tennessee's passing attack. Not just Guarantano, but the fact that Tennessee had 3 wide receivers total 100 yards, the first time in school history. You had Juwan Jennings, Marquez Callaway, and Josh Palmer all go over 100 yards receiving in the game. Robert, I don't know that we've seen, at least maybe not in my lifetime, just off the top of my head. I've not had a chance to really sit down and think about it and try to think of someone who else could qualify for this. But off the top of my head, I don't know that I've seen in season a better comeback story than Jarrett Guarantano this year. He mentioned after the game against Missouri on late Saturday night that he had gotten death threats from fans, and people were saying he was exaggerating. He wasn't. A friend of mine had mentioned to me on Facebook before, back after the Alabama game, that about Guarantano seeing people actually post death threats towards him. So I know for a fact that he did get some. Obviously, it's a minority of the fan base, but it does make the fan base look bad, even though it is definitely a minority. But he talked about he got death threats in just his poor play to start the season, that catastrophic play against Alabama. And then here he is making his first start in 2 months, and he went out and did something that only Peyton Manning and Tyler Bray, arguably 2 of the best arm talents that have ever played at Tennessee, he did something that only those 2 quarterbacks had ever done, and that is throw for over 400 yards passing. Robert, I don't know what more we can say about Guarantano. I raved about him on the post-game show on Saturday. Everyone else obviously has raved about him as well. What, in your opinion, do you think it was simply the benching that happened to him, where he lost his job and getting sat on the bench? Do you think that's what kind of spurred this on? What do you make of just this big turnaround, this big comeback for Guarantano this season, where he did not look like an SEC quarterback against BYU and against Florida earlier this season, and the next thing you know, he's out here etching his name into the Tennessee record books?
I mean, it's hard to point to one thing. Obviously, off the top of my head, like you said, being benched, especially as a starting quarterback in the SEC, I'm sure that they had to do something for his pride, and that it took that to, it was his job to lose at the beginning of the season. He was the guy. Nobody expected Maurer or Strout to ever really have to come in and play meaningful minutes, and it was his job to lose, and he lost it. He just played that badly And I think he was playing scared at the beginning of the season. And I think he wasn't confident in his reads, wasn't confident in his ability to run if he needed to do so. And so I think it just took getting benched, being able to see things from the sidelines and, get that extra little bit of perspective to figure out, what he needed to do better as he watched the other quarterbacks make the plays that they did. Because, when Maurer and Stroud came in, they made pretty big plays as well. And he just, he waited for his time, and then finally he got his chance again and, came off the bench, like you said, the past few weeks, has done really well. And then in his first start in the past 2 months, rather, he threw for 415 yards. So I think it just took a little bit of perspective for him.
Well, it's incredible, and it's kind of changed the narrative, not only around him, but also the narrative around Tennessee's quarterback room moving forward. Because I was in the camp of earlier this season thinking it was probably in his best interest to transfer, and then especially after the Alabama game, thinking it was probably in his best interests if this was his last season in Knoxville, if he went out and was a grad transfer after this season. Didn't matter where he went. I just thought it might be better for him and Tennessee to kind of get a clean slate after this year. Now, he was asked, essentially point blank after the game on Saturday if he's coming back next year, and he didn't outright say absolutely yes, but his answer did very heavily imply that he's going to come back. He mentioned I'm a Tennessee Vol. I put together all this work the last 3 years and hoping next year get it rolling. He didn't say he was coming back, but if you read between the lines, it sounded very much like he's at least planning on it and is keeping that possibility very much wide open of coming back next season as a redshirt senior. Robert, what do you want to see happen? I'd be curious if you're listening to this. Let us know if you're watching this on the YouTube channel. Leave a comment on the video. If you're listening to elsewhere, you can tweet at us. Rocky Top Insider is the Twitter handle, and let us know your thoughts. What do you all as listeners want to see happen with Guarantano? Do you want to see him come back? Do you want to see him move on? And Robert, what do you want? Because I'll give my answer after yours, but what do you want to see moving forward with Guarantano? Because I think what this comeback story is incredible, and it's not. I haven't seen anything really like this before, at least with Tennessee athletics. I could also see the argument of maybe it's still better if he does move on and go somewhere else or do something else and doesn't come back next year. But I'm curious, what do you think will happen, and what do you want to see happen?
Given the comeback that he's had, I was with you. I think a few weeks ago, I thought he's for sure going to transfer because, it is in his best interest. Things are just not working out in Knoxville. Go transfer to a different program. He could probably, he probably still has the talent to win a starting job elsewhere. It's not going to work here. But now that he has come back and he seems, like you said, I'm a Tennessee Vol. He seems like he's all in it. So, this is going to sound really, mushy maybe. I want him to do what he thinks is best for him, because Harrison Bailey, obviously we've seen the highlight videos, we've seen he continues to break records at the high school level. We know he's talented, but at the same time he is going to be a true freshman coming in next year. And it'd be pretty hard to, as a true freshman, win the starting job over what would then be a redshirt senior, especially after the comeback that he's had. So me personally, I want him to stay. As a Tennessee fan, even if Harrison Bailey wins the job, he could be a guy on the bench and in the quarterback room that's able to kind of, teach Harrison Bailey the ropes and, be a moral support for his team. But if he feels it's best for him to go somewhere else and, ride off into the sunset after what looks to be the great end of the season for him, then that's what I want for him.
I'm torn because I would like to see him come back again next season and with another off season of because I think part of it this year was, well, he talked about liking Jim Chain's offense and liking Jim Chain. I still think it was an adjustment for him trying to fit in that system and an adjustment for kind of having the more of the burden on his shoulders, because obviously he was the starter last year, but you had Killer Chris back there that if he messed up, they could put Killer Chris in and it would feel like there was a drop off, but there wasn't as significant of a drop off of turning to a true freshman or a redshirt freshman like this year. I think the pressure was different for him this year. I think the another adjustment of having to go to another offensive coordinator, his fourth one in 4 years. To me, seeing him with a year of consistency of having the same OC in back-to-back years for the first time in his Tennessee career, first time in his collegiate career, I think that'd be huge, and I'd be very curious to see what he could do with another year in this Jim Chaney system. I know obviously next year would be different with the wide receiver core, but I think now with the way Palmer's kind of coming on, with the positive things we've heard about D'Angelo Gibbs from practices and stuff too, I don't think the drop-off for this year, next year will be as significant. Obviously, you're going to miss Juwan Jennings. You're going to miss Marquez Callaway. But if Palmer can keep up doing what he's doing, he could be a legitimate, wide receiver one for the team next year. I think Gibbs has a lot of potential. Ramel Keaton and Cedric Tillman look like good options. You're bringing in a guy like Jalen Hyatt, who I think is a phenomenal player. I don't know how much he would really do as a freshman, but I think he's got a very, very high ceiling at Tennessee. Maybe you land Darnell Washington too as a 5-star tight end. I know obviously that's a little more of a what if, but you look at what this offense could have next year with probably losing Trey Smith. Brandon Kennedy seems open to a 6th year coming back as a center. You're gonna have Wanya Morris and Darnell Wright as sophomores. You're gonna have a couple other offensive linemen with another year of training with like a Kayron Calvert and Jerome Carbon and those guys. Bringing in a few more really good interior linemen in this class with the Cooper Mays, Javonte Spraggins, and the like. I would love to see him in next year's offense, but at the same time, I almost wonder if he feels like it's still better to kind of get a clean slate, go somewhere else for his last year, but maybe not though. Like I said, I think getting the consistency of having the same OC from one year to the next. I mean, Robert, that has never happened in his career as a college player. I mean, I don't know what happened in high school. I don't know his coaching situations in high school. Who was calling the plays and stuff for when he's up in New Jersey and Bergen Catholic. But I almost think if I'm Guarantano, I look at the situation of, do I really want to transfer to another school to have another offensive coordinator, another quarterbacks coach, when I know, and obviously, it's not guaranteed Chris Winkie will come back as the QB coach this offseason, but Jim Chaney's come back as OC, and it would be the first time in his Tennessee his collegiate career period that he's had the same OC in back-to-back years. I almost think if I'm Guarantano, like you said, I want him to make the best decision in what he wants to do, but I almost think that appeal of having that consistency of being able to be with the same guy and be with these same players and stuff in the same system for 2 straight years, I think that's got to have a major appeal. And I think if I'm him, that makes more sense to me than going to, I don't think Rutgers is a choice, but going to another school somewhere else for another year when I don't know that you're going to get, I don't know that any other school is going to be able to offer better coaching and better development than what you're going to get with this staff, specifically with Jim Chaney.
I definitely agree. You want what's best for him. And having that caliber of coaching, because you look at Georgia, their offense from last year to this year, that is. They still find ways to win games, but you can tell their offense is severely lacking from what it was a season ago. You've got to attribute most of that to Jim Chaney. They still have Jake Fromm. They've got a couple different players now. DeAndre Swift is still there. Justin Fields obviously transferred, but he was the backup. You look at Jim Chaney and what he's done at every school he's gone to, and then you look at what Georgia is missing now. That has to be a big appeal. Like you said, you get the consistency, and you also get a caliber of coaching that you're probably not going to find anywhere else.
Well, Robert, let me ask you this. Let me switch gears here a little bit and talk more about the team, because I could go on and on about Guarantano and the turnaround he's had, and I think a good question to ask would be, and it actually got asked on the Swain event on Monday morning, and I was actually thinking it on Sunday, and I was thinking about maybe doing an article about it, and I still might, but I think a good topic of conversation, we might get back to this here at the end of the podcast. We'll just see how kind of the time goes here. But I think a good question, a good topic of debate would be who's had the biggest improvement this season, Guarantano or Nigel Warrior, because both those guys have just completely turned around not only their careers but this season, because Warrior, obviously didn't have a very good first 3 years of his Tennessee career, didn't have a very good first 3-4 weeks of this season, and now suddenly he's playing like an NFL safety. Like he's having such a phenomenal back half of this season, and that you could say the same thing about Guarantano too. But to go to more of a team perspective, Robert, when Tennessee was 1-3 or 1-4, whichever one you want to choose, after the Florida game or after the Georgia game, when Tennessee was in dire straits, when it looked like things were going to just continue to go downhill, I guess what season prediction, what were your predictions, what were your thoughts about Tennessee's 2019 season when the Vols were sitting there at 1-4, 1-3 with the just disastrous losses they had? What were you expecting? Were you expecting 3 wins, 4 wins? What was your state of mind, back in late September, early October?
At that point, I was figuring that there was a chance Tennessee could turn it around and win some games. Not to this level. A bowl game, obviously, was out of the question in my mind. But you think, how good South Carolina, how good is Missouri, how good is Vandy, those kind of teams, like the bottom half of the East, I guess. And you think Tennessee could probably maybe get lucky and win 1 or 2 of those. But at that point, after we had lost to Georgia, or after Tennessee had lost to Georgia, I would have said 4 wins. You also have UAB in there, which was not, by no means a guarantee, especially given how Georgia State went to begin the year. Everybody thinks, you look at the schedule, you think, oh, that's a guaranteed win, it's homecoming. But, then in reality it turns out to be a much tougher matchup maybe than everybody, including myself, had anticipated. So the bowl game for sure was out of the question, and at most 4 wins after either the Florida or Georgia game.
I think, if I remember correctly, I was right there with you. I looked at the schedule and I thought they could get to 5 wins. I thought 5 wins is doable because you look at the schedule, and I thought Tennessee would be able to beat Vanderbilt, beat UAB, and I thought they had a decent shot at being able to beat South Carolina or Mississippi State. So I thought at absolute best, Tennessee was going to go 5-7 this year. When they were sitting there, I thought that more so after the Georgia game. My hopes were, I'm pretty sure, even lower than that after the Florida game, because Tennessee just looked. They looked hapless. They didn't. I wouldn't say hapless, because I thought there were points there in that first half where if Tennessee was a better team and better coordinated as a team, they actually could have given Florida some trouble because they were forcing turnovers. They were playing decent on defense. It's just the offense could not do a single thing. So I don't know if I would say, I was completely distraught, completely downtrodden after that Florida game, but it felt like to me that was a 3-4 win team after the Florida game. And I felt, after the Georgia game, after seeing the way Brian Maurer played in that game and seeing the way the offense sparked some and just kind of the overall effort they gave against the Bulldogs in that game, I thought, okay, maybe this team can get to 5 wins and maybe they can at least match last year's win total to where it's not a significant drop off to where you're not, you're maybe treading water, and at least it doesn't look like the ship is sinking. Whereas, if you go 4-8 or God forbid 3-9, that's kind of a disaster scenario. And that was a lot of the discussion about when we saw national media members and stuff drudging up the whole, well, they're Tennessee going to put in Philip Fulmer. That was a narrative. I don't know if it's crazy to think about. 2 months ago, Robert, we had Philip Fulmer come out onto the Vol Call radio show and say that he is not, that the coaching days are behind him, that he's not going to be coaching ever again. That was only 2 months ago that this happened. That may not even been 2 months ago that this happened. I don't remember what exactly that date was. It might have been early October, so it might have been 5 or so weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. I can't even do math in my head right now, but it might have not even been 2 months ago that this was happening. That feels like forever ago. Just the turnaround of this season has been nothing short of, incredible, man. It's been nothing short of kind of unforeseen. And I didn't think Tennessee would only lose to Alabama. I remember having conversations with Ben McKee here on the podcast and saying, I don't foresee with Tennessee at 1-4 after losing to Georgia. I was like, I don't foresee Tennessee's only loss the rest of the season being to Alabama. I don't see them going. I guess that would be 6-1 down the stretch. I said that would be stunning to me, and it is stunning. It's also stunning how they've done it. It's not been for the most part, it's not been some huge offensive explosion. Obviously, against Missouri, you had the 415 yards passing, but still only 24 points offensively. You did a good job of, I think, of scoring a lot of points against South Carolina, but that was also 2 touchdowns by special teams in that game. Tennessee's offense, I think, only scored 27 points total in that contest. So it wasn't, again, like they did have a good offensive game in that game. Don't get me wrong. That was another really good passing performance in that game by Guarantano, and Stroud actually had a good game, and that was obviously Jennings' best game of his season to date, and best game of his career to date, statistically at least. But they've mostly been able to do it. I won't say mostly, but a large part of the reason why Tennessee's been able to get to this point, Robert, has been because of the defense, and that to me has been, I guess, more surprising. Maybe it shouldn't have been as surprising as it has been, because Pruitt is a defensive-minded coach. He's a defensive coordinator at heart there, and he's especially a defensive backs coach by trade. But the way Tennessee's defense has clamped down, even, I know obviously having Tua out really hurt Alabama's defense, but that second half performance against Alabama's offense, the way Tennessee's defense played, I mean, that was phenomenal. Tennessee's only given up 31 points of offense in the second half over their last 6 games. Yeah, in this 4-game winning streak, and then the other 2 games against Alabama and Mississippi State, they've only given up 31 points total in the second half over the last 6 weeks. Say what you want about the growth of the offense and the offensive line of Guarantano. I think really one of the biggest stories that I don't think is being talked about maybe as much as it should be is just how big this growth has been on the defense. And that's with a defensive line that is, it's not like they're horrible, obviously. They're not bad, but it's just a defensive line that doesn't have a big difference maker. You're missing a McGooden. Ari Solomon has been banged up. You don't have a guy who you can count on to total 4 or 5 tackles a game or be a big presence off the edge. It's been with guys being banged up both in the secondary and in the linebacking core. I mean, Henry To'oTo'o has been hurt. Batuli started the season hurt. Bryce Thompson's been hurt in the secondary. Trevon Flowers is out for the year. This is a group that has been without one of their better players all season with them and Gooden. It's been without Trevon Flowers, who is a key backup for now a large part of the season. They've been banged up. And yet, and I know the competition's it's lessened some now after you've played the Florida and Georgia games, and like I said, Bama lost Tua in that game too. But still, the defensive effort from this team, Robert, I think isn't getting talked about enough, and I think it is. I think that is probably one of the more impressive things for me this season, is just how well Tennessee's defense has played here down the stretch.
Oh, I definitely agree. And then you look at the turning point of the season, which was the Mississippi State game, and they had 7 sacks that game by, I believe, 5 different players.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Darrell Taylor had 2, and then I believe, 6 other players each had 1. Or 5 other players each had 2, I mean. And I think that was, it starts on the defensive end, and then because Tennessee proved, okay, now we're capable of stopping these guys. We just have to put some points on the board. And I think, with the quarterback by committee these past few games, and then, of course, with Guarantano doing it solo against Missouri, you see in the offense be able to respond to the defense's level of intensity. I think one big thing, going back to Nigel Warrior, you talked about just his complete turnaround. I remember him getting torched past few seasons. Even against Florida, the secondary as a whole, I thought looked, they had 3 interceptions if I remember correctly. But that second half, they were getting cut up like Swiss cheese. And I think you get the pressure up front. You get 7 sacks against Mississippi State, and the defensive line has had pretty decent pressure every game since then, including at Alabama. And I think also the secondary has complemented that. Now you've got, just potentially maybe an all-SEC safety in Nigel Warrior. And then you've got guys, Bryce Thompson out there, Alontae Taylor making plays as well. In the open field, whether it be defending passes or whether it be tackling. I can think of against Missouri, Nigel Warrior. he read I think it was a speed option play out to the edge, and he came from way back in the secondary, tackled. I can't remember if it was Kelly Bryant or not.
I think it was their running back. I think it was Beatty. Maybe he tackled.
Yes, you're right. He came out of nowhere and just made great plays. So I think the defense as a whole is just getting better tackling, better pressure, and then better defense against the pass itself. A lot of batted balls, not a lot of separation from receivers these past few weeks. And I'd have to say that has to be the difference, because Tennessee's offense is getting there. Obviously, this last game, Guarantano with 415 yards was just incredible. But the defense has kept them competitive all through these past 6 weeks now, I guess it is. And it is incredible to see, because, like you said, Pruitt's calling card was his defense, coming over from Alabama. And people, including myself, are wondering, when is the defense going to show up? Because those first few games, especially against Florida in the second half, were really rough. And you thought, well, is Pruitt, is that just because he was a coordinator? Has he lost it as a head coach? Does he not have the right guys yet? But he's proven with these guys, these senior leaders, and then, some of the younger guys as well. But he's proven that the defense is going to come first. And that's what's going to win them games while he's here. This year and beyond, it definitely looks like defense is going to be his calling card.
To further that point, in Tennessee's first 5 games this season, the only 2 games where they held opponents to under 5 yards per play were against UT Chattanooga, which, throw that out, that's an FCS opponent, and Georgia State. But even that, Georgia State picked up 4.57 yards per play, which is still, that's not bad, but still more than what Georgia State should have been able to get against Tennessee. Otherwise, you look at BYU, they got 5.65 yards per play. Florida had 6.21, and then Georgia a whopping 7.51. So in their first 5 games of the season, three times Tennessee's opponents had over 5.5 yards per play. In the last 6 games, the only team that has averaged over 5 yards per play against Tennessee was, obvious, I think you can guess it, Alabama. Every other team Tennessee's played in their last 6 games, they've held under 5 yards per play, which that's a really good barometer. I think around between 4.5, 5 yards per play. If you're holding teams to around that's kind of average to good on defense. If you're holding them below 4.5 yards per play, that's usually good to great, depending on kind of how far below 4.5 yards per play it is. Tennessee gave up 4.6 yards per play to Mississippi State, 4.9 to South Carolina, 4.31 to UAB, 4.61 to Kentucky, and then only 4.24 to Missouri. That's the second lowest of the Jeremy Pruitt era. The only game where Tennessee had a better average as far as allowing yards per play to an opponent was last year's Kentucky game, when Tennessee held them to like a 3.6 or 3.47 or something like that. It was that was an incredible game. 3.59, that's what it was. They held Kentucky to 3.59. I'm talking about against Power 5 opponents. That was the best, because obviously Tennessee, they did a good job against Charlotte and UTEP and those teams last year, but those are small FBS schools. I'm talking about actual Power 5 opponents being the best defensive performances. Robert, to kind of close out this podcast, it'll be a little bit shorter of a one for this one, because we're recording it kind of late at night, and quite a bit of stuff left to do here too, and I'll get this out for you guys to be able to listen to in the morning on Tuesday. But Tennessee, obviously now 6-5, they're bowl eligible for the first time since 2016. I think a fun conversation to have once the Vanderbilt game's over. Once I don't know, but had to have that pretty soon, because I think they announced the bowl destinations and stuff. I'm trying to remember when they announced it. I guess they'd have to wait until after the next weekend for conference championships. But I think a fun conversation to have after the Vanderbilt game, once we know Tennessee's final record, will be, where do we want to see Tennessee go? Who do we want to see Tennessee play? Right now, let's keep it a little more, I guess, kind of abstract talking about it. I think it cannot be overstated enough. I don't think it can be overstated. I don't think it can be talked about enough or emphasized enough how important getting to a bowl game is for this group of Tennessee Volunteers. You don't have a large senior class. You don't have a bunch of upperclassmen. You have a decent size, I think, junior class. But for the most part, Robert, this team is constructed and founded upon the future. You're obviously this year getting a lot of contributions from your seniors, and I think that's been really cool to see is this this veteran group like the Guarantanos, like the Daniel Batulis, the Nigel Warriors, the Darrell Taylors, those guys, the Trey Smiths, the Juwan Jennings, Marcus Callaway's, all those guys, the older Vols, the veteran Vols. Most of those that I've named off, I think actually all of them, were Butch Jones recruits. It's cool to see those guys be a lot of the main contributors to this team, but a lot of your depth, a lot of the guys coming in to spell a lot of those upperclassmen when they're taking breaks and stuff, a lot of the times it's been, these freshmen and sophomores, these first, second, and third year players, and the third year players I'm talking about, like redshirt sophomores, like a Kieran Calvert, for example. This team, it has a very large number of younger players who haven't started or who haven't played a ton, who have started but hasn't been in huge roles up until maybe this season, and even then they're still have a lot to do, a lot to grow, and a lot of growth left to have. I don't think it can be emphasized enough how important it is to get to a bowl game and get these 15 extra practices and an additional game to work through things and to develop and grow as a team, because getting those 15 practices is going to be huge. As Pruitt, I think he worded it as the more time you have to practice, the better you get at practicing. And Pruitt is, as we all know, he's a huge stickler for practicing the right way, translating into playing the right way. And I think this team this year has bought into that more. I think you've seen better practices from this team this year, and it's translating now, obviously, here in October and November, into playing better, into getting wins and stuff too. Robert, I think it's vitally important that this team get to bowl game. I think this getting to a bowl game, even if they win, if they lose or whatever it is, I think the practices and the peripheral of the way that Tennessee fought back and fought through adversity to get to this bowl game, to turn this season around. I think for this roster it's important, and also for recruiting, getting to a bowl game is vitally important. I don't think that it can be. I don't think it can be overstated. I don't think it can be talked about enough. Just honestly, how big it is to get to here. And I think it's another conversation to have too about. I've seen people say, "Oh, why are people celebrating all this? This isn't Tennessee football. We shouldn't be celebrating getting to a bowl game." I have some more thoughts on that in a second. I just want to talk a little bit here about your thoughts on getting to a bowl game and how important it is for this team and for the future of Tennessee's football program too.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily just the fact that Tennessee is now bowl eligible and will for sure be playing in a bowl game. I think it's how the team's gotten there. And you look at, especially, like we just discussed, the team started 1-4. You're looking at the remaining schedule, and from that point on, they've won all but one game. That game, of course, being at number 1 Alabama at the time on the road. So the way that it has been done, I think, is just incredible, and I think that does speak incredibly well on the coaching staff, and then also on the culture that the coaching staff has been able to build. Because, like you mentioned, a lot of Tennessee's playmakers right now are some of these upperclassmen guys, Juwan Jennings, Marquez Callaway, Trey Smith, Nigel Warrior, Darrell Taylor. And for them to be the playmakers shows that Pruitt trusts his guys, even if they weren't guys that he recruited. But it also shows the culture that he's instilled. These older veteran guys have been able to buy in, and they've been able to make the biggest plays when Tennessee needed them most. So I think, winning 6 out of 7 games down the stretch, it shows what this program is capable of when Pruitt's players choose to buy in. Because if they lose that Mississippi State game, the team might have been lost, and it might have only been a matter of time before Pruitt was out of here. Even if he made it through the end of the season, that would have established a culture of, that bowl games don't matter and winning ultimately does not matter. So I think just how it happened and how this team was able to come together and how these older guys have been able to step up and show, the next generation of Vols players what it's like to win. Because, a lot of those older guys, they hadn't won that much either. So they kind of had to figure out just as much as anybody. But the fact that they've been able to buy in even with most of them being Butch Jones recruits, shows that Jeremy Pruitt has got a culture of winning and a culture of, like you said, practicing hard, making plays, and then ultimately, I think it definitely shows that Tennessee football is once again on an upward trend. So I think, there are people out there who say, yeah, Tennessee football shouldn't just be celebrating getting bowl eligible, because bowl eligibility should be the minimum for Tennessee football. But when you look at the past decade plus, and you look at, this season alone, starting 1-4, I think that bowl eligibility is definitely something to be celebrated, because it shows not only what this team's been able to do this year, but it shows where the program could go.
I think, to get my soapbox here just a little bit, so I apologize if I go in a little rant here, but I think that the people, and I've not seen a lot of people do it, I have seen a couple people say this online, and I've seen more people kind of reacting to that than actual people saying it, so I think it might be a little overblown as far as the reaction to it, but there still are people I've seen who have, I think, reacted this way, talking about, guys, I said, I think exactly what I remember it was, but talking about, y'all, we still haven't beaten anybody, and Tennessee hasn't beaten anybody good or whatever, trying to downplay the, getting to this point. Tennessee was a nobody. Just a few months ago, Tennessee had lost to BYU in a heartbreaking fashion. They had lost to Georgia State. Tennessee, and they get blown out by Florida and Georgia. Tennessee was a nobody just 2 months ago. They weren't predicted to. The only two games Tennessee was favored to win when they were 1-4 were against UAB and against Vanderbilt. Those were the only two games that any sort of predictive algorithm that Vegas, even up until, Tennessee was actually still a underdog against Missouri this weekend, up until the game. I mean, those still were the only two games Tennessee had been favored in since starting the season 1-4. I don't know. To me, people who are doing this, I think, just want to be miserable, want to be negative. I don't think they're looking at the whole story. I don't think they're looking at the greater picture of, yes, I think anyone who's very happy about this, anyone who's extremely happy about Tennessee going, turning around, being 6-5 now, I think anyone who is celebrating that, anyone who's celebrating this turnaround, anyone who is very happy that Tennessee is going to a bowl game for the first time since 2016, I think the vast majority of those people, unless they're a younger fan who hasn't seen Tennessee when they were good, I think the vast majority of those fans, they're not celebrating it and saying Tennessee's back or saying, hey, this is Tennessee football. This is what it's all about. This is what it should be. I think they're just excited because there's positivity, and there hasn't been. I mean, God, look back at the last decade. There's been like 2 seasons worth getting excited about for Tennessee football, maybe 3 since Fulmer got fired. There was excitement with the Lane Kiffin era that one year because he got people excited. He did, and it was kind of fun to root for Tennessee that season, even though they weren't great. They still went 7-5 in regular season, and they competed in games you weren't expecting them to compete in, and they won a couple games you didn't expect them to win. That was it for a bit because there wasn't really much excitement in the Dooley era. There wasn't much excitement in the first 2 years of Butch Jones. 2015 was full of heartbreak, but then you had a lot of hope at the end of that season. 2016, there was a lot of excitement before it, and in the beginning when you were 5-0, then that crashed and burned, and there hasn't been anything to get excited about since then up until this point. And then you also had the fact that Tennessee, like I just said, they were a nobody at the beginning of this season. They were a nobody who was 1-4. People were talking about, should Jeremy Pruitt be on the hot seat? Is Philip Fulmer going to have to come in here and be the head coach again? Is that what's going to happen? Who could they go and hire if they had to fire Pruitt after 2 seasons? And now you're hearing people talk about Pruitt should be, if not for Ed Orgeron, Pruitt might be the SEC coach of the year. I just think it's incredibly short-sighted, or I don't know, short-sighted. I think it's just incredibly just numb to the circumstances, and just to me, feel like you just want to be negative. You just want to sit here and wallow in I don't know, whatever you want to call it, negativity and being miserable. The Legion of the Miserable, as Johnny Majors once called people like that. I think it's just that's what they want to be, and they want to sit there and trash talk. They want to sit there and put people down, and they want to sit there and try to act like they're a superior fan because I'm only going to get excited if Tennessee is competing for an SEC or a national title. That's the ultimate goal. And like I said, I myself have got excited covering this team and watching them, come back and be a better team than what they are. But I also realize, this isn't the ultimate goal. Getting to a bowl game, Pruitt was very happy after the game. You could tell that's probably one of the happiest post games I've ever seen Pruitt. Obviously he talked about, there's stuff to change, but he was smiling. He looked like there had been a little bit of a weight lifted off his shoulders with that victory and getting to a bowl game, and you could just tell he was a little more, carefree. Obviously still not, because he still was very much in coach mode, and with his interview with Cole Kubelik and then with Bob Kessling and then with the media. But he was a lot more. He's been a lot different this year as far as how he's handled stuff in the media, but you could tell he was just a little happier after that game. But even he talked about it, what does it mean to get bowl eligible? Well, it means we won 6 games. He's talked about this is not the ultimate goal. It was a goal for this year. It's a goal for Tennessee's rebuild to get to a bowl game. It is by far, it is absolutely not the ultimate goal. And I don't think, that was where fans got frustrated with Butch Jones, because it seemed like with him, the words he was saying and the things he was preaching, it seemed like he was okay and content with just getting to bowl games and just winning bowl games and just winning 8-9 games in a season. I don't think you're ever going to have to worry about that with Jeremy Pruitt, with the background he comes from of winning national titles as a defensive coordinator, of consistently competing for conference championships at Alabama, Georgia, FSU. I don't think that's ever going to be a problem. So I think that people who are griping about it, like I said, it's been a small group of people doing it, but it just grinds my gears. That phrase cracks me up, but it really does grind my gears that there have been legitimate comments about people trying to downplay and just kind of poo-poo on this turnaround, because I think it is legitimately worth celebrating, keeping in mind that this is not the ultimate goal for Tennessee football, but I think it's worth celebrating the fact that you were 1-4 and now you've gone on a run to go 5-1 and it was 6-5 on the season with a chance to go 7-5 when it looked like you were destined for a 4 or 3 win season.
I mean, looking back to 2017, that was the program's worst year in Tennessee history ever. And then you look at Pruitt, year 1, 5-7. Okay, that's not great. And then in year 2, after starting 1-4, now this team has this chance. They'd have to take care of business against Vanderbilt, and then of course win in whatever bowl game they get chosen to go to. But this team has a chance to win 8 games. And you look at 2 years ago going 4-8. That's not the ultimate goal, but you don't go from 4-8 to national champions in 1 year. You gotta check off each box along the way. You can't just get all the way to the top. So, for people who are mad at this, just look back, to 15, 16, 17 when 7 or 8 wins was good enough, and then that culture established the worst year in program history. So I don't see how people can live like that. I don't see how you can always be miserable, especially if you call yourself a fan. I don't see how you cannot celebrate each victory, because at the end of the day, you're still in the SEC and you're still going to be now a top half of the SEC East team. So for me, I'm going to celebrate, going to a bowl and then hopefully winning 1 or 2 more games here. Obviously with the frame of mind that, you don't want to go 7-5 every year. But considering where this team was just as a program as a whole, and then also you look individually at this season, you look at where this team was, and then now where they're going to go. And that is, it just can't be stated enough how huge that is for the program. It absolutely is worth celebrating, because Tennessee football, at least for now, Pruitt will have to prove it in the years to come, but at least for now, it looks like Tennessee football is getting back to what it should be by all accounts.
Yeah, and I don't blame anyone for having caution about that, because like you said, it looks like it should be. We've seen this happen before with, obviously most recently with Butch Jones, where, like you said, it looked like for a little bit there that things were getting back to where they should be. And then obviously that was not the case. So I understand anyone who has any sort of caution about this, or is, saying, hey, I'm not going to get my hopes up too high. But I just have a problem with the people, like we've just talked about, who are talking about, Tennessee ain't beating anybody, or I don't know why y'all getting excited. Tennessee's just beating a bunch of trash teams, and we shouldn't be celebrating. We should be acting like this and acting like we're winning anything significant, getting to a bowl game. I just think that's very naive and not looking at the whole picture of where Tennessee football has been. This is their first time getting to a bowl game since 2016. And it's only like sixth time since Philip Fulmer was fired after 2008 that Tennessee's made it to a bowl game. I mean, they've missed a postseason more often than they've made it since firing Philip Fulmer. So I'm all for people getting excited about it. Like I said, I think, don't go overboard. Don't act like it is a national title or anything like that. But I don't care, man. Just be happy, be excited. There's something to be happy and be excited about for Tennessee football. Finally, it's not just hoping and wishing and saying, "Oh, look at the recruiting," or "Look, we're bringing in here," or maybe things will be better. Just keep waiting. Just keep waiting. I mean, I still think there's obviously a little bit of that to an extent because this isn't where Tennessee is, like we said, where they should be compared to historically. But there's a reason for hope now. There's not just a blind hope of looking at recruiting rankings or whatever. You've seen the actual legitimate development of some players this year, not just the upperclassmen, but I think the upperclassmen, that's a big bonus too, of seeing those guys have career years under this staff, but also seeing young guys Henry Toa is going to be, he should be a freshman All-American. He should be, I think by the time he's a junior here, he should be just a regular All-American too. I mean, that kid is phenomenal. Crouch has shown good development and as a good playmaker. You've seen positives obviously from Ramel Keaton, from Javon Flowers, who's a sophomore, but just these freshmen and sophomores, you've seen a lot of development, a lot of good play from those guys as well. And I think that should give you a lot of hope for the future of Tennessee football as well. But Robert, there's just a lot we could talk about. There's a lot I would still like to sit here and talk about from specifically Saturday's game, for Tennessee's future, for getting to a bowl game. But if we sat here and talked about all I want to talk about, we sit here talking for a couple of hours. So I think this is a good point to go ahead and end the podcast here. We do appreciate you guys tuning in for this episode of the RTI podcast, and I'm especially thankful for you, Robert, for coming on to fill in for Ben McKee for this episode. And you were great. You were great last time we had you on. I appreciate you coming on here again. We'll have to keep having you on here in the now that football season's almost over, have basketball season, because I know you and I are both really like basketball, and Ben does too. Obviously, I think the whole RTI team actually might be bigger basketball fans than football fans, but obviously football is the bigger breadwinner here covering Tennessee sports. So we obviously talk about and cover it a little bit more than basketball, but especially while it's obviously still football season. But Robert, any closing shots, any closing thoughts you want to throw out there before we end this podcast?
Basketball's 5-0, baby. So we're getting there. We're going bowling, and as of right now, basketball's still undefeated. So we're getting into the thick of the next generation of Rick Barnes players. Now that Admiral and Grant are gone, and they still look pretty good. So I'm excited to keep talking about them for sure. Go Vols.
Yeah, man, basketball. I'm this season's going to be a fun one to watch. I think they're going to be better than a lot of people expected them to be. But that'll be another conversation for another podcast here definitely in the near future, because it's basketball and football season right now. But I'm excited for this team. And oh man, I think we talked about it before. I don't know if you and I have, but I know I've talked about it in a couple of different podcasts about just how excited I am for next season's team too. But phew, that's going to be a team. But we'll go ahead and end this podcast here. If this is your first time listening, thank you all so much for listening to the RTI podcast. We really appreciate it. If you want to listen to more episodes of the RTI podcast, you can do that by subscribing to us in Apple Podcasts. If you have an Android device, you can listen to us on that as well. YouTube is a way that a lot of you have been listening, and I appreciate that. You can just subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's Rocky Top Insider on YouTube. You can also go to the website, RockyTopInsider.com, click on the podcast tab, and listen to it straight from that web page, or you can download it from that page as well. We're Rocky Top Insider on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I am Mr._Rutherford on Twitter as well, if you want to go follow me, interact with me. And Robert, you are Robert M. Hughes 9 on Twitter. You changed your profile. You changed your at a little while ago. So I was like, wait, he changed, didn't he? So you are at Robert M. Hughes 9. It's about how you would think it was spelled, Hughges on Twitter. So follow us, interact with us. We appreciate all of you listening. And signing off for Robert, I am Nathaniel Rutherford, and this has been another episode of the RTI Podcast.